Welcome to the 15th reading of Ynglinga Saga. Today I'm going to read about Hjörvard's marriage and the war in Svishod between King Ingjald and the Mogs Granmarr and Hjörvard. And first a short explanation of the word Mog, which I'm not translating. I'm just keeping the word as it is because it's a pretty specific word. Quite basically, it's means in-law. So familial relations that aren't by blood. And frende is blood relations. But Mog or Mogskap, which means Mog relations, Mogskap also counts if you get blood relations that are beyond fourth or fifth cousin. Then they're similar to Mogskap. And I'm just keeping that word because it pops up quite often throughout the sagas and has that specific meaning. Also, the Mogskap was very important strategically, and also was a holy bond as well. I'm in Hestehaugaskog. This is in Jutland, East Jutland, right on the start of the peninsula of Mols, and it's full of Iron Age, Bronze Age sites, and almost everywhere you go here you'll see burial mounds or the remains of it. Anyway, let's get going. Hjörvard's marriage. When King Granmarr heard of these news and great betrayal, he surmised that he would also meet with such ends if he wasn't careful. These news were, if you see my previous video, King Ingjald, the king of Svishod, he invited all the Shire kings to a feast where he was to inherit his father. And he had a new hall built for them and invited them in. And when they all were there and had started drinking and feasting, he set his men to burn down the hall with all the Shire kings and their men, and then claim their lands. So a great betrayal by King Ingjald there. King Ingjald, ill ruler. That same summer, King Hjörvard, who was called Ylfing, and his men came to Svishod and sailed into the fjord called Myrkvafjord. This is Mörkefjorden in Sweden, south of Stockholm. When King Granmarr heard that, he sent men to him and invited him and his men as guests. He accepted this as he hadn't raided in King Granmar's lands. And when he came to visit, there was great joy all around. And in the evening, when they were toasting drinks, it was the custom that they who hosted the visitors and held the feast should sit in pairs when they were drinking in the evening, one man and one woman, as far as it would fit, and when there were more of one, then they should just sit together. While the law for those who were in Viking, even if they were at feasts, was that they would drink all together. So here, King Granmar's men, who are holding the feast, the men and the wives are sitting in pairs, man, woman, while King Hjörvard, who is only here with his men in Viking, they just sit together, and quite likely in two separate groups. King Hjörvard's high seat was built opposite King Granmar's high seat, and all his men sat at his bench. Then King Granmarr told Hildegunn, his daughter, that she should dress up and serve beer for the Vikings. She was the most beautiful of women. She took a silver cup and filled it and went up to King Hjörvard and said, "Hail all Ylfings, in memory of Rolf Krake," and drank half the cup and gave it to King Hjörvard. He took the cup under her hand and said that she should come and sit with him. She said that it wasn't customary for a Viking to drink in pairs with a woman. Hjörvard answered that he was more inclined to change the Viking law and sit together with her. Hildegunn then sat down with him, and they drank both together and spoke together of many things. The next day, when the kings Granmarr and Hjörvard met, Hjörvard proposed and asked for Hildegunn's hand. King Granmarr brought this proposal to his wife, Hilde, and the other noblemen, and they said that they had great confidence in King Hjörvard. Now loud shouts of approval were heard, and everyone thought it a good idea, and so it became that Hildegunn was married to King Hjörvard, and he held a wedding for her. King Hjörvard was then to stay with King Granmarr, as he had no son to guard the kingdom with him. War in Svishod between Ingjald and the Mogs, Granmarr and Hjörvard. And Mog again means in-laws, basically. The same autumn, King Ingjald gathered an army in preparation for attacking the Mogs. He raised an army from all the lands he had acquired. And when the Mogs heard this, they gathered their armies, and King Høgne and Hilde, his son, who ruled East Gautland, joined them. Høgne was Hilde's father, who was married to Granmarr. So there are two Hildes here. King Høgne had Hilde, his son, and Hilde, his daughter. Of course, in Old Norse, these would be have different what do you call it? Like male and female spellings, so you could differentiate it like that. In Norwegian today, you would just be Hilde. I'm translating my names close to a standardized Norwegian thing. It's just that then the spelling is much easier with Latin letters. East Gautland is east of West Gautland. That would be south of Svishod. King Ingjald went on to land with his army, and he had the much greater army by far. The armies then joined together, and a fierce battle commenced. But not long after they had started fighting, the chieftains that ruled Fjedrundaland, West Gautland, Nærrike, and Åttundaland fled, and the armies that had come from those lands fled to their ships. All these countries are explained in my previous video, so if you click, there'll be a little banner on the video here. If you click that, you can watch that video and where all these terms are explained, these lands. After this, King Ingjald came into big trouble and was hurt badly, and escaped and fled to his ships. There fell Svipdag the Blind, his foster father, and both his sons Gautvid and Hulvid. Svipdag the Blind was the one who gave King Ingjald, when he was a child, burnt wolf heart to eat, and this is what the saga says made him such a despotic ruler later. King Ingjald traveled back to Uppsala and was greatly displeased with his journey, and he reckoned that the armies that were unfaithful in his kingdoms were so because he took them by force. After this, there was little peace between King Ingjald and King Granmarr. But when this had held on for a long while, friends of both men arranged a meeting between the two, and they met and made peace between themselves, King Ingjald and King Granmarr and King Hjörvard, his Mog. And the peace was to stand between them as long as the kings were alive. They bound themselves by oaths and guarantees. The spring after this, King Granmarr went to Uppsala to blot for peace. Blot is sacrificial rites, as the custom was when summer approached. The prophecy for him fell so, that he would only live a short while more. He then went back to his kingdom. So that was the strife between King Granmarr and King Ingjald, ill ruler. I think that's that for this time. Next time I'm going to be reading more on the death of King Ingjald, ill ruler. Also we get into King Ivar Widefathom. And gradually we're coming into where the Swedish power base spreads out into eastern Norway and kind of sets the foundation for the Ynglinga line consolidating Norway as a separate kingdom, although they spring out of the Swedish line. So we're getting close to the King Sagas themselves, which will start with King Halfdan the Black. And I just want to say again, this is Snorre is writing for the line of kings from King Harald Finehair, but if you go which come out of the east. But if you go to the west jarls and kings who also claim heritage from Odin, just as the Ynglings, but for example Håkon Earl, which we'll hear a lot about later, his lineage is claimed to go through Saming. And in the legendary sagas also there were other kings that held sway over Norway when you read them. And this was probably coastal Norway, going from Agder up through Rogaland, Hordaland, Sogn, Møre, Trøndelag, all the way up to Bjarkøy and Hålogaland. So if Harald Finehair was the first consolidated king, you know, he is so in Snorri's Heimskringla, but not necessarily so if you look at other more legendary sagas. So anyway, that's that for this time. And if you enjoy the content, please subscribe. And yeah, I'll be back with the next video on Ynglinga Saga and other videos. That's that for now.